everyone, I'm John Lynn, the founder and chief editor at Healthcare IT Today. We're excited to bring you another in our series of interviews with top leaders in health IT. And our guest today is Pedro Teixeira. He's CEO at PredictionHealth. Welcome, Pedro.
Hi, really excited to be here and then looking forward to chatting.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, this is an ongoing series of ambient clinical voice, AI medical scribe, AI virtual assistant. We'll see what brand ends up sticking, but it's the most exciting thing in healthcare IT for me. So excited to have you on the program. But before we dive into all the details, tell us a little bit about yourself and Prediction Health.
I'm basically a gigantic nerd. So I did comp sci and biochem back in college. Went to an MD PhD program where I found my co-founder who started Prediction Health with me back in 2017. But we've known each other since that program in 2009 when we started together. So we did the medical training and we also did the PhD phase in biomedical informatics. And so, only the nerdiest of the nerds go go into that zone. And we're just really excited about applying AI in healthcare workflows to help clinicians, right? So we'd see patients and we'd be like, there's all these cool tools that we wish we had. And that was kind of the very simple inspiration for us starting the company is like, let's go try to build things that we wish we had. And it morphed into us really focusing on physical therapy and occupational therapy, where we have AI models that will process all their notes for a lot of different challenges they have. So they have to make compliant notes, they have to code things well, and then of course nobody likes to write their notes, as folks watching this series will be well aware. And so we do a custom work for them, incorporating those other models into a real-time AI documentation assistant and scribe feature as well, which has been really well received over the course of the last year or so.
Awesome. I love hearing that story. I'm a tech guy, so I get a bit of that. That's my passion is how technology transforms healthcare. Sounds like you have a similar kind of feeling. Tell me, what is the story behind Prediction Health? Obviously you gave a little bit there, but how has it evolved and kind of where are you at today?
Yeah. So, diving deeper, the thing that Robbie and I noticed, way back all those years, and we've literally been kicking ideas around since, 2011, or so, was that you could do a really cool project, right? So for he and I, both for the PhD phase, we dove in and we did different medical projects. And Vanderbilt was really cool because they had built their own electronic health record using a language called Perl that I don't think is very popular these days, and it like looks like a total mess.
Hmm.
But they
I've
had actually
written
built their
Perl a
own.
few times.
Yeah, so I think some of
It's
your
the
viewers
old
are probably
days.
familiar, right? Yeah, yeah, I had to learn some of it at the time, but it's funny they built their own, and so they had millions of patients. They had a lot of data. They'd have genetic data too, which is really cool to have an EMR that both has an electronic format for the notes and the visits and all that lab data, right? And genetic information for a large portion of the patient population. And so, that's like the context in which we went to school there. And we thought like, oh, this is really cool. This is really powerful. There's all these cool things that you could do. But the painful part of the realization was that the system's not really designed to incorporate all that information in a way that was interpretable and usable by computers that then also fit into the clinician's workflow. So you could like one off a thing where you're going to go really deep and you're going to clean your data and you're going to understand your problem and train a custom model to do one thing, and then you're going to write papers about it, and then that's it. Like it's not going to end up in daily practice. And that kind of drove us nuts because we're like, this is so powerful and we're really excited to do this work for years, but this isn't something that then impacts patients and impacts clinicians in a day-to-day way in a positive fashion. And so we were like, well, we could go do residency, or we could do the kind of ridiculous thing of just like taking a leave of absence and starting this company and building software out of his like spare room. And we're kind of ridiculous, so that's what we did. And so we went off that route, and we started off trying to do documentation workflow with AI assisted scribes, right? And we just kind of sort of explored our way into this really neat combination in physical therapy and occupational therapy where they have, again, those different things, the coding, the compliance needs, and then of course they have to write the notes. And then a very unique setting too, because they have exercise sessions they're in a gym lots of times with music on in the background, and people are dropping weights sometimes and making noise. And it's a very interesting audio environment, for that component of it. But the sweet spot, I think, was combining these custom models for that specialty, right, for that field with the AI scribing piece. And that's sort of like where we really like to focus. And I think the thing that makes it sort of special is that it's a really intense focus in that domain where we have these additional things that we can do with AI models. That's not just like a big LLM, like summarizing a note, right? It's integrating these other very useful things from a organization perspective.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that area is interesting because they do long visits, they do short visits, they do
Yeah.
long visits with short documentation sprints throughout the long visit.
Right.
Like, it's definitely a different model of thinking than the ambulatory 15-minute visit. Your documentation's done.
Mhm.
That's interesting. So, how does your solution compare to, the various AI medical scribes, ambient clinical voice solutions out there? I could list them all off, but now I just tell people to go to Healthcare IT Today and click on the right side, Ambient
Yep.
Clinical Voice. You'll find a whole variety of them. But talk about how your solution compares and maybe some differences between what you're doing and other solutions out there.
Sure. So the first key difference is it is really focusing on PTOT. So that just has different visit types. I mean, they do things like interventions with patients, and they're doing exercises. They're in a gym setting, so very different from a lot of other medical specialties. And so we've had to really design around that. The next sort of two things, and actually where we started, like in our PT growth, was through the compliance model and the coding model was an analytic solution, which we still have in conjunction. So that's another sort of special thing about us. You have the thing that the clinicians are using, but then you have dashboards that the practice leaders are able to go into and see, like, oh, how's everybody doing from a compliance perspective? Are they doing thorough notes? Which is really critical, because if somebody doesn't do critical comprehensive compliant notes for whatever 3% of their visits, that payer can do an audit and then claw back 3%, whatever percent of the revenue. Then coding, also a really important thing. Like, nobody goes to school to learn how to do coding. They're going there to learn how to take care of patients. And so folks don't always know, with all the different combinations of things that they can do, what's the right code. But then that has really big financial implications. So we have the analytics tool that we married in with that scribing tool that's really focused in on physical therapy and occupational therapy, and that those models are then also used real time. So you're getting coding assistance and these other things baked into the EMR. And the one other really big differentiator for us is that we have used tools like this in the past, right? We've sort of explored this idea for a while, and having a copy paste from one window to another, back and forth, and open a different tool up is not a really great workflow. So for the PT specific EMRs that we've supported, we actually do a deep integration there, so that you're actually having the system reading, because of course we did the analytics tool, but you're getting to read that information on that visit, on that patient, their episode of care, and then also then easily putting information back in, and it's showing up right into that electronic medical record as well. And thanks to, I think, our time now in the domain, we've also built up some really great partnerships with some key EMRs there, WebPT, Prompt, and Raintree recently, which is really exciting for us too.
Awesome. Yeah, I want to talk about more about the HR integration in a minute, but walk us through the workflow. What does it look like for a clinician that's using Prediction Health? Is it on the mobile device? Are they using desktops? Is it both? Talk about the workflow.
Yeah. So a thing that you learn in the space is that there's a lot of different personalities. Like, the way people want to use the device can vary a lot. So the most common is that it's running on a laptop as a Chrome extension or a Safari extension, and you're able to open up your EMR, and it's just a little widget in the bottom corner of it, so that you're in the same system that you would be normally, but it's there. And you just hit record, and you can kind of walk in, talk to the patient, gather that subjective information, talk to them about your assessment, your plan for them, and then it's going to generate also in physical therapy, you have goals that you have to specify that you're aiming towards with your patient. And you also have, of course, your interventions that you're doing with them as well. And so it's just going to listen in and then show up right in there, and you can just accept them section by section, and it'll go right into that correct area of your EMR. Now, some people want to use an iPad. Other people want to be able to go in with a phone. Another group of people want to be able to just clip a little microphone to their collar and walk around the gym and do it. And so we've also built support for those use cases as well. So with various devices, start, go in, talk to the person. You can stop it, you can start it again, and it gets all of the information gathered to draft the note, and then shows up right in the EMR.
Very interesting. And this question is starting to become dated, but how much of this is automated with technology, or do you have humans obviously in the background, or of course the clinicians in the loop as well. That human's still there. But talk to us about your approach to automating it. Is it fully automated with technology, or how do you incorporate human feedback?
Yeah. So the drafts come in within seconds. So there's no human that like has to go through. Back in the day, early phase when we were exploring and the technology wasn't advanced enough, there were some days like that. But fortunately now you don't need that. Now, granted, we always make sure that you can provide feedback as a user. So if you get a note, they're like, oh, this was great, thumbs up. If you got a bad one, thumbs down, and a place for people to give us feedback on what was great or bad about that. There is then the R&D team that's regularly going through results and figuring out ways to improve the models and the whole processing pipeline. So there is a human sort of feedback loop with regards to improving the system, but real time, you're hitting stop, and then a few seconds later, that whole draft of the note is showing up right there, and that's pretty critical for like the really great user experience. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it will be interesting to see how that continues to evolve, and how the clinicians continue to give feedback to improve the models. There's going to be a lot of work done there that will be interesting. So you talked
Yeah.
about EHR integration. Obviously, there's some very specific PT EHRs that you mentioned already. Talk about that integration. Are you just going to work with those three EHRs that you mentioned, or are you looking at others as well?
So we have those are the ones with whom we have an official partnership, which of course helps in some ways. But we work with a variety of other ones. So like Athena Health, we cover Empower, and so other groups. And so sometimes you can do different things depending on whether or not you partner with folks. Sometimes you need more help, sometimes you don't. But we do our best to at least have the insert nicely and cleanly done, so you don't have to go like click over here, copy the section, go back here, paste it in. Just like a one-click interaction for each. So the insertion, we call it the insert button. We usually try to build in directly. And then like historical data is another really key piece. And again, fortunately, because we started off as an analytics company processing all this like historical data where we'd go potentially like years back at times to pull in, we've built that out for actually a pretty broad swath of like all the like major EMRs or most common EMRs in the PT setting. And then folks don't always think about Athena, but Athena actually has a fair number of folks that are in the PT space that use that as their EMR of choice.
Sure. And is it mostly through that Chrome extension, the web browser extension? So these are web-based EHRs largely, or are you doing direct integration with any of them, or is it mostly just through the extension?
We've done a couple direct features with some folks, partners specifically. But most of the usage for that real-time tool is through the Chrome extension. We've also actually done a desktop offering. So for desktop EMRs, which are actually still quite common, there's an option there as well. That's most relevant to Raintree and, for example, like NetHealth. There's a lot of folks in those domains. And again, you have different personalities, and some people are just crazy efficient with their desktop EMR, and even if there is a web version, they may not want to switch, because they've just gotten their flow nailed down. We try to meet people where they are.
That's awesome. And talk about the clinician experience. What have you learned, about what they need to do, to change as far as how they talk in, I don't know if it's even called an exam room for PT, in the
Mhm.
facility, the gym
Right.
almost, is there things they have to change, and how do you onboard them? Is there a training
Mhm.
process that you go through, or, what's the process of kind of getting them started with Prediction Health?
No. So most of it's pretty similar to what they're already doing, which is nice because then you can tell folks at the very beginning, just start it and then stop it when you're done, and then see if you like the results. And just with no, additional change besides hitting that start and stop button, they'll usually really like the subjective. The assessment portion can be quite good for them as well, and it's sometimes one of the biggest pains to do because at the end of a long day, your brain's a little fried, and like coming up with the exact right, formal sounding phrase for the thing that you want to do can be a bit of a pain. So people really like that. And then goals. There's a compliance requirement for how the goals are written. They have to be functional, measurable, et cetera. And so that's another one where like we generate a bunch of drafts for that. So that can be already there for you. And then plans usually kind of small. The one where they require sort of the most modification is for the objective data. So when they're doing a physical exam, a lot of times folks aren't verbalizing stuff, or they have a lot of stuff going on there in their heads. They're noticing a lot of interesting things about the patient, ranges of motion, strength deficits, et cetera. And so that section, because we can't build something that reads your mind yet, and I don't know if we will, but
Computer
for that
vision's
part,
getting close,
yeah,
but
right. You could watch, and there's brain chips and things. Who knows? But anyway, not to scare anybody off.
yeah,
But for the objective part, for a lot of the stuff that you're doing, where it's more nuanced and sometimes quantitative, like because you're going to do like a range of motion, or I think the strength is 4 out of 5, etc. You need to verbalize those parts out. And at this point, we've got thousands of people that are using the system, daily. And they usually think initially like, oh, is the patient going to think this weird? But the vast majority of patients actually like it, because when you're just looking and assessing and it's just all silently happening in your head, it's hard for a patient to understand all of the thought process and rigor you're putting into your assessment of them. And so calling it out so it gets documented well is usually actually kind of impressive to the patient, and kind of like really reassuring that like, oh wow, like you're looking at me and you're seeing a lot of things and assessing, and they're learning a little bit more about their care, and even kind of end up being a little bit more bought into it, which is really exciting. So that objective section is the one that needs the most adjustment.
yeah. I think that's super interesting we've heard that a lot from different ones that the patients love hearing you verbalize, but you're right, in PT, it's a very technical description that could come off in interesting ways. But yeah,
Mhm.
uh, that's interesting that they see the
Mhm.
depth of analysis. I mean, I've been to plenty of
Yeah.
appointments where and I've even heard clinicians say sometimes when you listen to the heart, it's theater to make them feel like they're being seen, even though they already did it because they heard the way you breathe, they heard the way you cough, but we don't
Mhm.
hear that often. That's what they heard
No.
and they observed. So that's interesting.
Yeah. No, for
Let-
sure. And then you asked about sort of onboarding.
Yeah,
So, again, we start folks off with like very simple, just like, hey, hit start, hit stop, see the results so they can get some sort of familiarity with it. But then we have videos going through sort of the key steps. And right in the window, we have a little get help. So whenever folks are getting started, they can just click that and it'll show them commonly asked questions, walkthroughs for like the general intro. And then we do a deep dive into some of the other features that we have, because we have several things on top of just the AI Scribe, like a little Ask AI, so like a HIPAA compliant ChatGPT incorporated. We have the coding module that can be integrated in as well. So it's all just kind of right in there in the thing, so folks can learn as they go about the more advanced features.
very interesting. Let's talk about accuracy. Yeah, I find it fascinating to see how different companies are approaching accuracy, measuring accuracy, and ultimately the question is how accurate is the solution? How
Mhm.
do you look at that?
Yeah, so it's funny because it seems like such an easy thing, because people are like, oh, how accurate is it? And then they're expecting a number, right? And ideally they want a number that's pretty high. But what do you do if you phrase something a little bit differently than somebody else did, right? Or your style's a little bit different. If you mention a fact that's true based on the conversation, but the clinician normally wouldn't put in the note because they like to write really concise notes. Is that right or wrong, right? So there's a lot of nuance in how you do it. What we do is essentially we distill down to the key facts, key medically relevant facts, and then we look at the overlap, and we do it section by section. So we even penalize the model if it generates something that's factually true, but it puts it in the assessment instead of the subjective. It'll lose a point for it. So doing that approach, we calculate out on the last benchmarking we did about a 93% accuracy for it. So it can actually be quite good. And speech to text accuracy has gotten quite good over the years too, which is really exciting and a key piece. But anyway, we see a pretty high accuracy even with a pretty rigorous standard there. And even with accents, with people, kind of being sometimes far away from the mic, having music going on in the background, and all the other things that happen in a PT setting, I still see quite great results, which is exciting.
Yeah. No, it turns out accuracy. Well, one, I think everyone's going to be essentially accurate. Like,
Yeah.
and I don't think as humans we can distinguish between 93 and 95, right? Like, essentially it's a similar,
Mm.
accuracy level. But there
Yeah.
are so many nuances to it, whether it's the transcription, whether it's the note creation, whether it's capturing the right information that clinician
Yeah.
wants. Yeah, there's a lot of layers
Right.
to it.
Oh,
Uh,
for sure. For sure.
Are you gonna stick with PT and OT, or like, are you gonna expand beyond it to other specialties? What's or are you like, hey, we're just gonna be PT and we're gonna stick to that?
So the mission, when we started, was we wanted to be as helpful as we could to clinicians so they could take the best possible care of patients. And I think we found this really great combo in PT where we have these custom models and the analytics coupled with that real-time tool. But um, If that's useful in PT, we would like to take it to other places. And there are several sort of specialties and areas that are sort of natural extensions for us. But the thing that we want to be thoughtful about is we do think that you need to have that other analytics component, that other thing that the organization maybe is going to care about, is population statistics, a lot of different things that we could look at that we want to couple with the real-time tool. And so over time, we would like to horizontally expand into some more specialties, but our focus is going to be in identifying areas where we can do both, but like help the clinician real time, but then also do these useful analytics to help organizations optimize as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I hear more and more people saying that the ambient clinical voice note creation stuff is just the beginning, and it will be kind of these table stakes, and the differentiation is going to happen with all the other tools. So definitely will be interesting to see how each of those evolve and where different companies take it. So I think the number one question we always get after doing these videos is, where can people go to learn more? Where can they get a demo? Yeah, where can people find out more about Prediction Health?
Yeah, so there's predictionhealth.com. And so you can just go on there. You can see some of the tools we have. We have a testimonials page, which honestly is probably the most helpful thing for clinicians, right? What do other clinicians think of using this and how have they benefited? So I highly recommend that. And then you can reach out to us directly there for a demo. And then there's also just info@predictionhealth.com if you want to send a message. Sometimes folks have questions they want to follow up on. You can do that as well.
Awesome. Pedro, I appreciate you taking time to talk with us and share about Prediction Health's approach to this really exciting area of healthcare technology. So appreciate it. And thanks everyone for watching and listening. If you want to find more great healthcare IT content like this, be sure to check it out at healthcareittoday.com or search for Healthcare IT Today on your favorite podcasting application. Thanks, Pedro.
Thank you.